And that we can also support the mental health literacy and give them the good science and good information about games so that games aren't demonized and games aren't misunderstood. So I'm Eve Crevoshay. I'm the executive director of Take This. And Take This is a research, advocacy, and training mental health organization that serves the game industry and the game community with a variety of resources and tools. And we also, obviously, we do our own research. And I've been at Take This for almost 5 years. And in that time, we've really evolved from, thinking about how to serve people at game conventions, which is still important, to really thinking systemically about how we can address the underlying issues, cultural factors, norms, practices, design elements in the industry and in games that both positively and negatively impact mental well-being and mental illness, and try to improve the conditions of making and playing games. And we love games. That's why we are doing this work. I work mostly with mental health professionals and trained clinicians. And we're all invested in celebrating games, but also identifying the ways in which how we do things can be harmful, and saying, hey, we can do better. We can make the culture of studios different. We can think differently about passion and overwork and psychological safety and burnout in studios. And then we can have happier and healthier workforces that make actually more effective games, like games that still are fun, still get competitive, but are places that are safer and more welcoming to more people, that have a wider potential audience, and that don't cause really serious challenges to people. And that we can also support the mental health literacy of people who are in this community, right? So that people have tools just to be well generally in their lives, and that we can talk to people outside this community in this industry and give them the good science and good information about games so that games aren't demonized and games aren't misunderstood. And so parents and regulators and media have the tools to talk about this stuff effectively. So mental health is the well-being of your brain, which includes your thinking, your cognitive function, your emotions, the ways that you frame, and understand your self-confidence and the way that you think about yourself in the world and the way that you react to situations. And just like physical health, it requires upkeep, right? We talk about self-care in kind of popular vernacular culture, but things like sleep and time alone, or time doing things that are hobbies, that are fun, and time with a supportive family or community. Those are all things that improve mental health. Mental illness is a set of actual medical diagnoses that have been, some of which have been debated over years and changed, but generally are problems with or challenges with brain chemistry and various ways that the brain works. So in general, when and the thing is that mental illness is a really broad category, and mental health challenges can exist even if you don't have a lifetime diagnosis. So in general, when you know it's a problem, when you're emotional state and your mental state is a persistent, ongoing obstacle to living your life, to maintaining your work, to maintaining healthy relationships in your personal life, to keeping your physical health in check. So it's all of those things that there is an impact, a negative impact to more than one of those on an ongoing basis. Then you know you're not okay. And sometimes it depends on the diagnosis or the person. It can manifest sometimes as anxiety and hyperattentiveness, and sometimes it can manifest as apathy and depression-like symptoms, and just like an ability to accomplish anything. So it can be a really wide range of things, depending on the type of challenge you're experiencing and the context and of who you are and your underlying personality. So first, what I'll say is that actually mental illness is really common among the entire population. Some statistics note, like some studies have noted that like 1 in 2 people will have some sort of mental health challenge at some point in their lives. That's half the population. So it's really common, and we for a long time have not had the language or the kind of acceptance to talk about it generally. There are certain things that cause greater levels of challenge, and the game industry, which tends to work people for really long hours, tends to include work environments that are where harm is common, abuse, harassment, other forms of uncertainty, lack of management skill, and this idea that our passion is what keeps us employed, which is actually a pretty toxic thing. Those all make it harder to maintain your well-being. And so we see a lot of kind of mistaken ideas. People are like, oh, we have to work 70 or 80 hours a week to do our best work and prove that we're passionate about this, when actually we know scientifically that our brains stop working very well after 40 to 45 hours a week. Like, we don't put in our good work. We actually are probably harming the work we're doing, but we can't step away from that cycle. And especially if managers are, perpetuating this kind of behavior above us. And so it's we see that a lot in the game industry, and we're here to basically say, hey, like, there's other models for thinking about this, and actually, if you want to do your best work, which we all, we're all in the same boat about that, you have to think really radically different about what it means to work hard and work well. I mean, I'll say this. Mental health challenges are kind of a normal part of life. There are also specific ways that our work lives and our society exist that exacerbate those challenges. Absolutely. Yeah. So the only workshop that I teach that we do is called Leadership and Self-Care. And really what I'm trying to do in that workshop is to say, hey, you have to model the practices that you want to see in your employees. That means, and we don't talk about work-life balance, because balance is a kind of ever-changing, kind of hard to define thing, and work and the rest of life is like, that's not an appropriate way to balance things. Think about it. But work-life separation. You have to have good boundaries between when you're working and when you're not working. You have to have real clarity around as a leader, that everything you say and do is a model for what your employees are going to say and do. That means that when you model vulnerability, when you model transparency, when you model aspects of psychological safety, like promoting this sense that I'm not going to blame you as a person if you make a mistake or have a bad idea. We are working together towards the same goal, and something may not work or we may make a mistake, but that's okay. I'm not going to attack you as a person. That kind of thing. Those are the building blocks from a management perspective of a healthy workplace culture. And some of them are very straightforward, but often they go against what we think of as good management or good leadership, and they're hard habits to unlearn. And so it's the process of helping people find very specific, small tactical changes they can make to become better managers and leaders over time. So yesterday morning, Tim Schafer was interviewed by John Ekanayake, and he said, people are promoted into management without knowing how to do management, and especially in the games industry, there's just not that professionalization, or there hasn't been, right? And I think that because you are creative and know how to make a game does not mean you know how to manage a team. Those are different skills. Like, people are trying to come up with new ways of thinking about, hey, you have really great creative leadership. That's different from people leadership. How do we separate those things? How do we think differently about that? And I think that's one thing, is that those skills are not the same skill set, and often they're really at opposition with each other, that not everyone's designed to be a good manager or wants that responsibility. And also, yes, we have a lot of really bad models for this. A lot of those models come from cultural norms around masculinity, around what it means to be strong, and a lack of nuance in thinking about power, right? We don't have good tools for thinking about power, about respect, about vulnerability. Like, vulnerability and like the ability of people to change, those aren't things that are part of how we think and talk. And so, yeah, we have been looking in the wrong places for good leadership, and we have been very limited in the set of ideas that we consider for that category of activity. It's true, but I think people can easily misunderstand that vulnerability requires you to share a lot about your life, when actually vulnerability can happen inside a work context. Like, I can be vulnerable with my team and be like, I don't know the answer to this question, or I don't know what to do here, or I messed up. I want to apologize to you. And that's all work related, but that's vulnerability. And those are really powerful moments. I've, as a manager and a leader, had profound organizational growth and deepening of trust when I say, I messed up, I need to apologize to you all. How can we make sure we don't do this again? Like, that's a really profound statement. That's vulnerability. It is not me oversharing about my marriage or my, lack of whatever, I don't need to do that. I do often also talk about my personal life because it's a small team. We all work from home, right? That's fine. We've cultivated that, but that doesn't have to be what we do. And I think that it's useful. These things are always in the details, right? To talk about the ideas is all well and good, but you need to have scripts for what to say and think through specific scenarios, because if you don't have those tools, you're going to get into the moment and be like, I don't know what to actually say. Right. Like there might be somebody who really responds to, no, go get it done, like straightforwardness, because there are cultural differences, there are emotional differences, there's historical differences, there's like trauma and experience that people bring from other previous employment situations, all of that. Like you have to manage people. You can't manage like tasks, you manage people. And so you have to respond to the person in front of you and listen and contextualize what you're thinking about. And that is probably the most important starting point, is that remember that when you're managing a team or leading an organization, at the root, this is a group of people, individuals, and they will give you the best work that they can do when you respect them and make them feel safe and are transparent and open with them about how this is working and what's going on in the organization. The baseline is to do the simple self-care, to get your sleep, separate from work, eat well, get outside, get physical activity in your life, whatever that looks like for you. Like do the basics, and sometimes that's hard, like just to be transparent, like we're not always good at taking care of ourselves, but like that's the basis. And to think about work and work-life separation, thinking about setting good boundaries for ourselves. And making and holding boundaries can be very hard. It's something I struggle with personally, but like that's a really important skill. And one of the first places to think about it is when I'm not at work, I'm not at work. And when I am at work, I am. And how do I separate those out and make it clear to folks when I am and am not available? And if you're not in a situation where that's possible, think about whether or not that's the right place to be. But so those are the basics. We talk about protective factors like resilience, which is like building up basically the stores you have to maintain your well-being. And the greatest protective factor you can have is a supportive community. So find your people, whether that's online, and that's a valid place to find your community, your people, or it's with some hobby or some community or even family around you. Those people need to be in your life because they're great. They energize you, they support you, they validate you, and also they can be there when things go wrong or when you need help. And that kind of community is really important. The other thing is to have a mindfulness practice of some sort. This is an important part of something called self-compassion. It comes from Buddhist practice in Eastern traditions, but it's been shown to be really helpful. Mindfulness practice is often like, oh, it's got to be yoga or it's got to be like meditation. There are a lot of things that can be mindfulness practices that work for you in different ways, but it's something where you're not distracted by an actual task. Your mind is able to kind of let go and process. You can kind of you're not reading, you're not listening to a podcast. You may be walking, you may be journaling, you may be cooking. Like for some people, cooking is a really wonderful mindfulness activity. For some people, yeah. Oh, maybe I should have dinner there. That sounds fun. There are, maybe it's like going out to a field and like throwing a ball to your dog, but just doing that in silence, right? That is the kind of space and time where your mind can recover and also reflect. It's self-reflection time. And often, and it's actually deeply good. It's really good and healthy for your brain. So there's a lot Yeah, there's a lot you can do on your own without trying to upset a boat that might not be friendly to you, to going into hostile conversation. And there might be, subtle ways that you can eke out, 30 extra minutes in your day where you just turn your phone off. And that's, between, say, I'm going to eat dinner every night at 7, and between 7 and 8, I disappear. My phone's off or on silent. It's in another room. I'm just not available. If that's your baseline, great. Another way, and I would encourage that to be the bare minimum. That's really not healthy. I would say, I leave the office or I turn my computer off as I work from home, and I'm unavailable after 6 p.m. Period, full stop. When I get up in the morning is when I'll answer these emails. If you're not in a position to do that, I will say this, especially to people who are young and new in the industry, no job is worth the mental health impacts. People who have been in the trenches of this work and in the industry will talk about how they were hospitalized because they crunched so much. Their physical health never recovered. There's a term called allostatic load, that if it gets too high, your stress levels get too high, you actually suffer permanent physical harm. No job is worth that. And there are other ways to think about it. If your livelihood is threatened, that's going to be a harder choice to make. But do think about, in the short term, what the impacts are versus in the long term, what they are. It's a hard thing to do to separate your fandom and joy around a title or an IP or your childhood memory of playing some game from the actual you're now working for someone who is to make a game that they're going to make money off of, and are you benefiting from that work, or are they benefiting from that work? It's remembering this is a capitalist society. If you're doing too much work and not getting compensated for it because you're contracted for 40 hours, not 80, they're getting all the benefit of your work. And you're not doing yourself any favors. You're going to come out a loser in this because your well-being is going to be impacted. So we have a huge website full of free resources, including a mental health resource, a crisis lines page and all kinds of resources. And that's takethis.org. So you can go there. It's really easy to navigate and find all those resources. We also have, we provide workshops and training inside the industry. So there's stuff on our website about that. You can reach out. We have contact form. And then we're always speaking at conferences, mostly in the U.S. and Canada, but, slowly expanding our connection. And then we do research. We do mental health research and research into kind of those related areas. And that is that's a space where, there's all kinds of opportunities for us to talk to people who play games, talk to people who make games, talk to folks who are impacted, part of this community in some way. And so, if you see us on social media recruiting, participants in studies and research and surveys, that's a great way to be a part of our community and add to the body of knowledge. So we can come up with the best solutions and the best responses to what's going on in the industry.
Thanks for enjoying another episode of the 80 Level Roundtable podcast. Check out upcoming episodes on the 80 Level website at 80.lv. Join our career site at 80.lv/RFP. And share our podcast with friends and on your social networks.